Today we begin the third of the Treyasar, the third book of the 12 brief books of Nevi'im, in Nevi'im Achronim, the variety of different prophets from the first and second temple period. We just finished the book of Yoel. Yoel, we didn't know when he lived. We don't know. First temple, second temple, more allusions to the first and second, but verses that seem to apply with the second. Also similarities to Malachi, we don't know. As opposed to that, Divrei Amos Asher Haya Vanokdim Mitikoa, Asher Chazal Yisrael Bimei Uzziah Melech Yehuda Bimei Yeravam Ben Yoash Melech Yisrael Shnatayim Lifnei Hara'ah. So here we have a lot of information. This is Amos, and he was a simple guy. He was a sheep breeder, and he lived in the town of Tekoa. Today there is a place in Israel, Yeshiva, in Yehuda, called Tekoa. And he offered his visions to Israel during the time of Uzziah, the king of Yehuda, as well as Yeravam, the king of Israel. And this was 2 years before the Ra'ash, before some sort of a big earthquake occurred, which we're told about in the book of Melachim, and it's referred to in Yeshaya. And we don't know. The belief is Uzziah once goes into, I believe it's the Kodesh Kodashim, or tries to act as a sort of like a Kohen Gadol, and he gets Sarat, and he reigns for many years, but his son is usually actually the one who is the king, because Uzziyahu is hidden away, and that's what this refers to. So we know when this is. This is about the 8th century, before the Common Era, is when this happens. And let's read. Vayomer Adonai mitzion yishag u'mirshalayim yitain kolo vavluno otaroim v'yavesh rosh hakarmel. And what is proclaimed, what is stated by Amos, God will roar from Zion. And maybe that's why Amos follows Yoel, because we just had in the last chapter of Yoel, where Yoel talked about God as being an Aryeh Shoeg, a lion who shouts out from Zion as well. And the pastures and the shepherds will languish, and the summit of the Carmel will wither. And this is something that he knew about. He knew about the shepherds. He knew about the sheep. Ko amar Adonai, al shlosha pish'ei damesek v'alba lo ashivenu, al dusham bacharutzot habarzel et hagilad. God said, and this is going to be one of the themes we're going to see, for 3 transgressions of Damascus, I forgive. But for the 4th, I will not revoke the decree, because they threshed Gilad with threshing boards of iron. Right, the difficulty that was done is something that God cannot forgive the people for, and so punishment will come. V'shalachti H bebeit Chazael v'achla armonot ben Hadad, and I will send fire upon the palaces of Chazael, and it shall devour, completely destroy the fortresses of Ben Hadad. So this is right. So here we see this is the kingdom of Aram. Chazael was the king. Chazael is, I believe, anointed initially by Elisha. It's a fascinating chapter we learned back in the book of Melachim, where Elisha goes and he meets Chazael, and he's crying, and he says to Chazael, Chazael, why are you crying? And he says, because of all the destruction that you're going to cause to Bnei Yisrael. And Chazael says, do you think I'm such a dog? And it's unclear. Does that mean that he doesn't have his own choice and he just follows what his master says? And there's a lot of sort of the interesting stuff back in that chapter. But this is right. Elisha dies after this, not long afterwards, and Chazael, Aram, attacks the kingdom of Yisrael until the time of Yeravam II. He's called Yeravam II because the first king of Yehuda is Yeravam as well, and therefore he's known as Yeravam II. And that is when Amos is living. And we're talking about the destruction that's going to come to Aram. And with it, that means that there is going to be a very successful military campaign of the northern kingdom. It's during this time that Yonah ben Amittai, who we will learn about in a little bit with his book, which we know about, of course, Yonah appears before Yeravam II talks about extending the border. So this is a prosperous time, and it comes with the destruction of the enemy for most of the time of the northern kingdom, which is Aram. Continuing verse 5. V'shavarti b'reach damesek v'yikarti yoshebi b'kat aven v'tomech shevet mi beit Eden v'galu am Aram kira amar Adonai. I'm going to break the gate of Damascus. I will wipe out the inhabitants from the Vale of Aven, right? And the scepter, ruler of Beit Eden, and the people of Ram will be exiled. They will go away. Ko amar Adonai. Al shlosha pishei azav yarba lo ashivenu. Al haglotam galut shlema lahaskir Edom. And God says, for 3 transgressions of Gaza, right, that I'll forgive. But for the fourth, I will not revoke the decree, because they exiled an entire population which was sent to Edom. So this is talking about, right? This is talking about the people in Aza, presumably the Plishtim and others, and they devour Israel. We talk about it in the book of Yeshaya. It's talked about. It's talked about also the destruction that's going to come to them in Yirmiyahu. And so here, right, God is saying this is going to be a good time. It's going to be a prosperous time. During that same period of time, the kingdom of Yehuda is also very successful. They extend territory and land all the way down to Eilat. We saw that also again in the book of Melachim. So this is a prosperous time. The enemies of Israel are being vanquished. Continuing in verse 7, and I will set a fire upon the walls of Gaza, and it will devour the fortresses there. Vichrati yoshev me Ashdod v'tomech shevet me Ashkelon v'ashivoti yadi al Ekron ve'avdu sheri plishtim amar Adonai Elohim. We know Ashkelon and Ashdod as 2 cities near Gaza that are in Israel, but in the ancient period they were cities of the Plishtim, of the Philistines. And so God says here, I'm going to wipe out the inhabitants of Ashdod and the scepter from the ruler of Ashkelon. We talked about back in the book of Shmuel. There were 5 cities of 5 great cities or principalities, however we want to put it, of the Plishtim. There was Gat, and there was Ekron, and Ashkelon and Ashdod are 2 more of them. So here we have Ashkelon and Ashdod, and Ashkelon and Ashdod mentioned along. Turn my hand against Ekron, and the Plishtim who will remain will be completely destroyed. Continuing, you're going to see the same thing. Verse 9, Ko amar Adonai, al shlosha pishei tzor v'al baralo ashivenu al haskiram galut shlema Edom v'lo zachru brit achim. So God says, again, for 3 mistakes, sins of Tzor, of Tyre, I'll forgive, but the 4th I will not, because they handed over an entire population to Edom, ignoring the covenant of brotherhood. What's the covenant of brotherhood? Here we have the word shlema. We know Tzor, they had covenants with David and Shlomo, that they were close. Hiram was the king of Tzor. Hiram was the one who provided Shlomo with all of the cedars. Of course, Shlomo paid for him, and Shlomo gave him cities. The king of Tzor, Hiram, didn't like those cities, but the history of their partnership goes back a great while, a major amount of time. And so it's surprising that it's not surprising that then God is upset and he's going to destroy. We talked a little about Tzor back in the book of was it the Yeshaya, I think, where Yeshaya really goes to task against the people of Tzor. It's not exactly clear what they do wrong, but there is an event where they take spoils and they are involved in the slave trade, and they send members of Bnei Israel off they sell them into slavery. So that seems to be what is their great error that's being mentioned here. Continuing verse 10, I will send down fire upon the walls of Tyre and will devour its fortress. We already talked about it, that the prophecies that are told about Tzor, about Tyre, that are proclaimed back in the book of Yeshaya don't come true at that time, because Sancheirav, the Assyrian king who destroys and conquers much of the Middle East and much of this territory, is unable to defeat Tzor. He's unable to defeat Tyre. It was an island. It's only later on, I believe, during the period of Alexander the Great, if I remember correctly, it's 2-3 months ago, who can remember anything, that he sends, he fills up the little bit of the sea in between the coast, the Mediterranean coast, and Tyre, which was an island a few miles, and only then, when he can come in with his foot soldiers, is he able to defeat them hundreds of years later. Ko amar Adonai, al shlosha pishei Edom v'al bar lo ashivenu al ratfo b'cherev achiv v'shichet rachamav v'yitrof la'ad apo v'evrato shemara. This is verse 11. God says, for 3 transgressions of Edom, I'll forgive, but for the fourth, I will not revoke the decree. Because he pursued his brother with the sword and repressed all pity, because his anger raged unceasing and his fury stormed unchecked. And here we have, of course, the great enemies of the Jewish people, the people of Edom. Edom are the descendants of Esav, all the way back from when Esav was first born, by Eitzei, Harishon, Admoni. The first one came out ruddy. And so, right, we know from the get-go that Edom Israel has trouble and problems with Edom, and that continues on for generations. Continues on. We talked about it after the destruction of the Beit Hamikdash. We'll reference it in the book of Tehillim, where it talks about how Edom was joyous at in the Psalm 138, where it talks about the Bnei Israel crying on the rivers of Babylon after the destruction of the Beit Hamikdash, and the Edomites rejoicing over it. Verse 12, V'shilachti eish b'Teman v'achla armenot bitsara, and I will send out my fury towards Teman, and it will devour the fortresses of Botzra. Let us continue. More of the same. So God says, for the Ammonites, again, three things I can hold off on, but the fourth, I will not revoke the decree, because they ripped open the pregnant women of Gilad in order to enlarge their own territory. So brutal battles by the people of Ammon at Bnei Israel, terrible things that they did to Bnei Israel, and therefore for that God says, I am not going to forgive them for what they have done. And here we see, again, it's unfortunate, these things that remind us of the massacre on Simchat Torah, the ripping open the pregnant women of Gilad. Gilad is on the eastern bank of the Jordan. Most famous son of Gilad, Eliyahu Hanavi, Eliyahu Hagiladi. This was not during the time of Eliyahu. This was later, but we know Ammon, of course, enemy of Bnei Israel, all the way from the time when Bnei Israel wanted to just ask, can we just pass through your land? We don't want your land. We just want the western bank of the Jordan River. And Ammon refuses, and they become an enemy of Israel. Then the book of Shoftim, it occurs again. In the book of Shmuel, the book of Melachim, they're the first ones, Nachash b'nei Ammon, to attack Bnei Israel after they have their first king Shaul. So it's unfortunately, it's a long time. It's something that's happened, and here we finish. Let's continue. Verse 14. And I will set fire to the walls of Rabbah. Many times we reference this Ammonite city Rabbah, and it will devour its fortresses amid shouting on a day of battle, on a violent tempest. Valach malcham bagola hu v'sarav yachtav amar Adonai. And so he says that the king of Ammon and his servants and his officers will go out. So we're setting up a time period. How are Bnei Israel going to respond? Here we see most of these books in Nevi'im Acharonim, we talked about yesterday, talked about at the end of the book of Yoel. Most of these books, Bnei Israel sin, and then God says, I'm going to send an enemy against you. And then Bnei Israel, of course, they ask for forgiveness, and God goes and destroys the enemy. This book doesn't start that way. This book starts with the destruction of these other enemies. We'll continue tomorrow with the book of Moab. And the question is going to be, how is Bnei Israel going to react? And something that we said a long time ago, if you don't remember, you may remember, maybe I don't remember if I said it, the reign of Yeravam the second, Yeravam ben Yoash, not Yeravam ben Nevat, the first Yeravam, is in many ways seen as the last chance for the northern kingdom, the kingdom of Ephraim, the Israelite kingdom. They're once again being given wealth, military success. God is helping them out. They're not under the pressure of their enemies. And how will they react? Will they remain faithful to God? Will they set up a just society? Will they care about the poor? And so God is setting up this question that is going to be discussed by Amos, and we'll see in the coming days how Bnei Israel will respond. I have a visitor who's here. Okay, down boy. So that was yesterday. We talked about Klavim in the book of Yoel, not today. Have a wonderful day, everybody. Let me just say one thing I meant to say at the beginning, but I dedicate this learning to my nephew, David Schwartz. Tonight in Israel, just watched, and I imagine Rav Shmuel watched it as well, was the Shloshim. Truly a heartwarming in terms of hearing, beautiful words that were said about him by a variety of people from my family, from his family, friends of his, all sorts of different people. And so we dedicate our learning to him, and certainly I know that I will remember him for the rest of my life. So he's David ben Saravi Yair, and should just remember him and be inspired by his life and the lives of all those who have given their lives to Medinat Yisrael recently.
Thank you.